Okay. I just very quickly confirm that I've got all of our judges here. So, Giannis, I can see you. Yeah, there we go. And Francois.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And do I have a fourth chair as well? Looks like I forgot him in Kazakhstan. Okay, great. Thank you. Alternate, right? We have the team from Croatia and the team from Serbia all together. Perfect. Excellent. Okay. So I understand this round is going to be streamed by the organizers, by the Orcom. Is that correct? The teams are aware? Perfect. Okay, just a reminder that if there are any problems with connections, it's great that we've got the teams all together because perhaps that will be helpful insofar as we won't lose one speaker. But if, for example, the connection goes for one of the teams, I will stop the time and we will wait for the team to be reconnected. If that doesn't occur before the 5-minute mark, I will, of course, still try to reconnect you, but I'll bring in someone from the CAP to come in to help us out. And then when we are able to restart, we will actually have the speaker start from where the judges remember or had last heard the point of that speech. And so then the time that was, the time will restart from that point. Okay. Just also a reminder that if there are any issues like during the round, so as in like the team does not get disconnected, but something has happened to our ability to hear the speakers, again, I will also perhaps just ask a stop time and just ask for that speaker just to repeat what they've said, just so that we're all on the same page. Does that make sense? Excellent. Now, I want to ask one of my panelists if they know how to get things sorted out so we've got the timer on the screen. In the last round, I had a panelist manage the split screen with the timer, just so that I wasn't that we weren't having to worry about that. Giannis, do you think?
I can do the fancy Josh Bloomberg version, but I can do the classic stopwatch version.
Perfect. That's all I need. Thank you. Yeah. Perfect. Okay, and I have team opposition's lineup in the chat. Is proposition's lineup in there as well? I don't see it. If proposition could put your speaker lineup in the chat as well, that would be helpful.
We did put it in.
Okay, I guess I'll have to scroll up. Hang on 1 second.
If you can't find it, we can write it again.
Yeah, I think maybe I was switched in after you had put it in. So sometimes what happens is you don't see what was in the chat. Yeah, thank you. Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so if there are no other questions or issues, yes.
Sorry, can we just agree on how we want to receive POIs? Like, can we ask that Team Serbia just raises them by saying it out loud, so verbally?
Perfect. Excellent.
Oh, okay. So you want us to do that? Okay.
Okay, fantastic. So I now welcome you all to the third round of the online WSDC Aztec Division. We have the team from Croatia and the team from Serbia debating the motion, this House would replace human judgment with computer algorithms in criminal sentencing decisions. I now call upon the first speaker from side opposition to open the debate. Hear, hear.
Hey, can everyone hear me well? Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, okay. Can I start? We can all agree that today there is a historical and present discrimination against disenfranchised groups such as people of color, minorities, immigrants, people living in poverty, and so on. This is creating a systematic racism, and on top of that, a personal prejudice. We can see that today, 33% more respondents in polls described white people as intelligent than they did black people. As a result of this preset set of beliefs, people have biases, and their jury judges are people. We can see an example of the WSDC report where black male offenders received sentences on average 19.1% longer than similarly situated white offenders. This unfair sentencing is made possible by having a not identified unified criteria for sentencing, and secondly, giving the judges a freedom to adjust sentences at their own intuition. We would change this to our model by firstly, changes that we would make to the current justice procedures is that infractions such as public disturbance or DUI would simply not be a part of the criminal record. And secondly, misdemeanors such as petty theft would be erased from the criminal record 2 years after committing the crime, which is already in practice in many states in Europe and Asia. Now, how does sentencing look like on our side? Firstly, the algorithm has a certain sentencing guidelines that are working, that the algorithm has to work according to. And secondly, it takes two factors into consideration, which is firstly, the information about the crime the defender is currently convicted of, and secondly, the previous criminal record of the defender. Now, I would now note that the severity of the criminal record will be crucial because this means that if you steal something worth 50 euros 3 times, you will be charged the same sentence every time. But if you start, for example, with petty theft and progress to armed robbery or violence, your sentence will certainly increase. Based on this information, the algorithm will calculate the risk of recidivism. Secondly, whether you need rehabilitation and for how long you will be getting it. And thirdly, what kind of harm and how much harm have you done to the society. And based on these information, the sentence will be made to be appropriate for the crime. Now, note that the side of opposition will most likely tell you that the accuracy of our algorithm will not be good, but we can see that today there is a trend to improvement of accuracy of the AI. For example, in April 2020, the best face identification algorithm had an error rate of 0.08% compared to 4.1% for the leading algorithm in 2014. Well, we believe that simply this cannot happen with people because as I live, I gain information, and based on those information, I make my own opinions, I make my own biases. And I tell you that certainly no one can come to me and erase a part of my memory in order to change my opinions, to change my biases. So the side of opposition needs to clearly say and prove to you why human judgment will always be better than algorithm. Well, we believe that this switch from human-based sentencing to algorithm sentencing is a natural transition in aim to make our justice system airless and fair, just like we've done in the past, just like we changed justice system in the past to make it more fair. Now, in my speech, you will firstly hear my first argument about ensuring impartial and unified justice system, and in our second speech, you will hear our second argument about preventing further discrimination and inequality. Now, going on to my first argument about ensuring impartial and the unified justice system. So why is it important to have an impartial justice system? Is in order for it to be effective. This means for everyone to know that they will not be able to find a loophole after they committed a crime, and this is deterring people from breaking the law in the first place. Secondly, to make sure that the offenders get balance and proper retaliation for their acts. Thirdly, for victims to be sure that the system is recognizing their suffering and actually giving them closure. And fourthly, for people to simply have a trust in the system and provide them a feeling of safety. So let's take a look why none of this is actually happening on the side of opposition. Why is the current system so impartial? This is happening. Because we are giving the judges. So much power, because judges are giving certain freedom in sentencing to further reduce the sentence if they decide to do so. This is called the downward departure and variances. This is the so-called wholly human touch, empathy, understanding, and so on. But the problem is that here is exactly where the racism and discrimination is happening. This is why we can see that black males receive a 21% less of this downward departure, and when they do, it's 17% shorter. Now, why do we believe the judges will never be able to be impartial? Firstly, because they have different sentencing criteria based on race and wealth. People who are wealthier, have a job, and even play golf in their free time are deemed more reliable and less likely to repeat a crime. But because of the structural racism, we can see that Black people simply cannot get a stable job. They cannot get good education, and therefore they're perceived as less reliable. This is the present ethnic and racial bias among judges. We have already explained this to you in the stance. Secondly, judges are biased. They are humans after all. They have their own problems, their own mood swings, ups and downs, and so on. We can see that the likelihood of a favorable judge spiked up to about 65% after the judges had lunch before had a break for a meal or snack. So what I'm actually doing is I'm asking you, jury, would you like to stay in prison 20 years instead of 20 months because your judge didn't have an afternoon snack before your trial? So the third point about judges having more and more imprinted pictures of Black people as criminals. This is because every day they have trials. Every day they sentence Black people to longer sentences. And the more they perceive them as criminals, the bigger the sentences they give to them. They put them in a box. They put them in a box of Black people who have to be criminals because they're Black. They are no longer looking at other factors such as employment, criminal record, and so on. And this is because they have their memory, and we can simply not just remove it like we can do as an AI. So to conclude, there are people and ethnicities that have an unfair advantage in criminal sentencing that cannot be changed differently. So what is the result of this? As the people are aware of discrimination that is taking place in court, and they want to change up the system. For example, a poll in the US revealed that an overwhelming 92% want some sort of change in the civil justice system. Now, the impact of this is that innocent defendants are pleading guilty. They don't believe that they can prove their innocence. In the status quo, people simply don't go to trial because if they go to trial, they will get a bigger sentence, which is proof. We would eliminate this by removing the human factor, by giving an algorithm the job of sentencing. The second thing that is happening is that victims don't get the closure they need. Unfairly reduced sentences, privileged groups don't only hurt our sense of justice. For every released rapist, there is a victim knowing that the people who hurt them the most is not adequately punished. They feel betrayed by the justice system. Now, how do we change this with the algorithms? It's because algorithms create, firstly, one criteria for all people. All the important information that I have mentioned in my stance are put into the algorithm and they show us the sentence. This means that there is no bias put into the algorithm, and it can be checked and made sure multiple times by many people that is fair. Well, we can never program humans to not be biased. We certainly can't do this with algorithms. This is exactly why we propose. Secondly, as I already mentioned, algorithms have a trend of improvement in accuracy. For example, Compass, the leading algorithm, in 2019 had 90% accuracy, while people had only 60% in accuracy. And the third point, when deciding how much a person will spend in isolation, away from their family, away from the society, the government should make sure it is taking as much objective variables and factors as possible in order to make the sentence fair. And the AI, as it is an objective factor. So if you do believe that justice is blind, and no matter what race you are, you should not be privileged or discriminated, vote for said proposition.
Okay, I thank the speaker for their remarks. A reminder that to note the timer, just so that everyone can be aware of when you're moving in and out of protected time, especially if we're not comping to signal that. I now call upon the first speaker from side opposition to open the opposition case.
Can you hear me well now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take visual POIs, so I think we can start. Okay. Mom asked, if your friend jumped off the cliff, would you do it too? A answered, yes. Because AIs are a great way, they're a great tool, but they sometimes have difficulty in differentiating bricks from cats. So we don't believe there are the best solutions in this case. So we agree that the justice system is bad and biased and it's flawed and it's not perfect, but we want to change it. We just don't believe this is the way to do it. Now, we also have to say that it's getting better. So it's not the same as it was 70 years ago, 60 years ago, because homophobia, racism, and other biases are less and less socially acceptable. And we as an opposition have a duty to prove, have a burden to prove that, number one, the justice system is already getting better organically. Second of all, this proposition makes the stated problem even worse. And thirdly, that this goes against the idea of justice itself. Now, the first speaker has told us that details of the crime, the criminal record will be taken into the account. And we asked that this will inherently include race, economy, etc., because endangered people are systemically forced to commit crime more. Their neighborhoods are more policed, and they're more likely to get caught committing crimes. You're not solving the real problem. You're not solving the racism this way. So you can't ignore all those issues and factors, really. And these people really are more likely to commit crimes again. But do they deserve greater punishments because their circumstances force them to do so? Now, the first speaker in characterization and talking about status quo stated that judges are more biased, that they're biased. And we think this is a bit of simplification because we have to concede that some judges are biased. There is a bias in the justice system, but the judges are still trained professionals for their jobs, and they're educated to have less biases. They're educated to spot their own biases. And there's always a right to appeal. So in higher courts, there's 3 judges. In Supreme Court, there's 9 judges. So bias decreases the more people you have in the system. Now, the second way is that it's judges not more biased, is that it's getting less and less prominent because social movements like LGBT movement, Black Lives Matter, and so on have gained some weight, and minorities are getting more aware of the situation they're in. Social media, more internet, more transparency, more people educated and aware, more people in majority groups. Yes, I take PI.
What do you say about the judges who simply said that they decided to give someone a longer sentence because they saw it in their eyes, which is a legit example that happened?
Okay, yeah, thank you. Well, we'll address that later, but okay, yeah. we say there are some biased judges, but you can appeal. You can always have some higher to overrule that decision. So it's not, it can't stand. But more people in majority groups are becoming aware. And thirdly, even if judges are biased, now there's a room for change. By making AI, you just entrench the justice system where it is. And yeah, so that's actually the first argument. But this motion, you entrench the status quo. So the first way you do it is problematic history, and this directly clashes with their idea that AI are going to be more objective, because input on the AI is based on previous cases. You can't make new cases, and you have to train your AI some way. And if there's a bias in previous cases, AI will replicate it. Further back you go in history, there's more bias because people were more racist, more homophobic, and so on. The further back you go, the more cases you have, and the more accurate your system is. So there's always going to be that kind of trade-off. And blacks and men have historically been given harsher sentences for the same crimes, and it will just become replicated in the AI system. Now, the second way is that AI is a black box, and it's hard to challenge the AI's decisions because people don't understand this technology very well. Because even experts who make AIs and computer scientists don't know what is, it's a black box for people because they don't know what factors it factors in. Because they can sometimes make correlation, make implication. For example, IBM Watson was supposed to predict which people are criminals and which are not. And it, as a factor, it took, if they have tattoos, which has really nothing to do with their criminality, because it was, there was a simple correlation with that. So, yeah. The third way is everything that happens before sentencing there's a lot of flaws in there. So before the sentencing, you have the police investigator, you have the grand jury indicting, you have the prosecutors, you have jury making verdicts. So all that can go wrong. By solving this, you don't, by just changing the sentencing way, you don't solve the problems. No, thank you. But you exacerbate that whole problem, because now people will believe that AIs are more just, and they will have no incentive to solve these previous problems. Now, the fourth way this entrenches the status quo is that you can't have new penalty policies, because you have already ditched judges, for example, 20 years after implementation. You can't train with no new input cases, and we're left with prison or fine or community service, and that's it. So you can't implement the new policies because AI doesn't have anywhere to train from. And if we want to drastically increase or decrease punishments for some crime, prescribed punishments for some crime, AI will get confused because it's trained to give sentences based on previous cases in which, I don't know, for 150 years, there was a single range of sentences for murder. And if you want to change it, AI wouldn't know how to deal with that. Now, how this destroys the vision of justice, which is our second argument. Now, justice is not an objective reality or objective truth you can just find out by scientific method. It's a social construct, and everyone has their own vision of justice. So we take the average of all people. That's why we have representative democracy. That's why we have courts. That's why we have all that. So it's changeable through the generations, through the centuries, and through the cultures. No, thank you. And for example, death penalty, torture, and whipping were perfectly acceptable 200 years ago, but they're in no way acceptable now. So how does this destroy the vision of justice? The first way is that AI has no stake in society as opposed to judges, because judges are people. They judge, and they get judged by the people, their actions. So their vision is a reflection of community's vision of justice, and their vision can change alongside community's vision of justice. And they have a stake in community and country, and they have to think about how will their decision impact them themselves. AI doesn't have that. AI doesn't have to live in society it creates. It just spits out decisions and spits out output, and that's all it does. The second way is accountability. You have higher courts. You have higher court judges. Those decisions can be appealed. They can be challenged. You know, more agents deciding. If you have more courts and more judges, there's more representation from the whole system. If the society doesn't agree as a whole, they can protest motions. They can protest sentences. They can do all of that, because laws and justice are a societal consensus, and we as a society have a duty and have a right to choose which laws are being applied to us. And if nobody in society thinks this law should be applied that way, it's justifiable that people protest and rebel against that. So AI's decision cannot be challenged in any way, because it doesn't care about what's going on outside the courtroom. It just spits out data, and its opinion can't be appealed by hard courts. And third way, whom to trust, because sometimes witnesses have contradictory statements, they have different angles, perception, memory, and so on. It just has to decide if there's some mistaken police work before that, and whom to trust, really, those witnesses whose story is the most real. And only human can change human errors that occurred before that, because AI doesn't really know whom to trust or how much weight to give to each person's testimony. And the fourth way that you enjoy justice is plea deals. Plea deals are taken by innocent people too, because they will spend less time in prison than if convicted usually. And this goes against the principle of justice that everyone should have a right to fair trial. Now, they're taken because people are afraid of the outcome of the trial. So it will be even more clear because the AI, you can't know how it does things, lawyer can't advise you. So it's really, really going to exacerbate this problem with plea deals. Thank you.
I thank the speaker for their remarks. I now call upon the second proposition speaker to continue proposition case.
Can everyone hear me well?
Yep.
It's been 152 years since Black and white people became completely equal in front of the law. And yet, in the past decade, white millionaires like Jeffrey Epstein have managed to evade anything longer than a year-long prison sentence, despite having had raped dozens of 14-year-old girls, while Alvin Kennard, a Black man from Alabama, was sentenced to life without parole for stealing $50 worth of groceries. I don't know about you, but I don't want to wait another 152 years for one step forward. I'd rather just start sprinting right now. So here to prove to you once again that justice is blind and that we can only ensure this on site prop, here's what I'll do in my speech. I'll go through the 5 main points that have come up in this debate so far. The first one about bias, the second one about the working of the algorithm, the third one about minorities, fourth about the entire trial system, and the fifth about human touch. And lastly, I will introduce our second substantive, which talks about further discrimination and inequality from the past. Okay, the first thing that we need to clear out before I move into any of this is that the side of opposition doesn't understand that here we are debating exclusively about sentencing, okay? So when they keep telling us that the entire system is corrupt and horrible and there are problems with trial, we couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, this is not the debate. We are talking about sentencing, which, by the way, has a huge importance solely on its own, because it's actually the biggest factor that makes that causes the disparity currently. Because as we told you in our first speech, actually judges give a 21% higher sentence to black defendants than white ones. Okay, so unfortunately we can't change the entire judicial system. But even if we could, we would be so happy to actually move towards a system that is entirely AI. Because what you're basically telling us with this is that we recognize that there's human error in literally every step of the process. But in order to fix it, we just keep it all. No, we're telling you, firstly, we're starting with what we know that we can change, what is easiest to change at the beginning. And then if in 10, 20, 30 years, we can see that the whole system can become great, but unfortunately, that's not happening now. Now, on to the first point about the bias of the algorithm. What the side of opposition keeps trying to convince us of is the fact that the algorithm has to be fed data from the past. Okay, first of all, no explanation why this has to be true. We have told you in our model that the most important thing that the algorithm actually has to take into itself is the information about the current crime and the information about the past criminal record, okay? And we can prove to you that this is true because there has actually been a research made that analyzed the most important, the most famous algorithm of such today, and it showed that the only variables you actually need to get the most accurate result are age and past criminal record, and it further showed that even age isn't as important of a component. Okay, so basically we're telling you that our algorithm could work. But let's take you on your highest ground and say that even if the algorithm couldn't work, and move on to our second and important point about minorities. Okay, 3 things here why comparatively on our side of the house minorities are much better off. Firstly, the fact is that humans are simply humans. If somebody named Carl bullied me in high school, I'm going to have bias towards people named Carl for the rest of my life. And pardon my French, if somebody has a resting bitch face the first time I see them, they literally don't even have to say a word, and I will immediately feel towards them that they are somebody who is less likely to continue a better life afterwards. The fact is, you can't change this, and comparatively, AI will never have no incentive to have sort of bias. Secondly, we can see that there is a pattern with these sort of judges, because if they have convicted in the past, unfortunately, more black people than white ones, people only confirm their bias further, and they will think that this is something that happens in the future. And thirdly, no matter how hard some industries try to convince us that there are robots who are in fact not human, it is a fact that no robot, no AI will ever sit in front of the TV and watch Law and Order, where 50% of the criminals are black and minority gangs. They will never listen to today's pop culture, where 50 Cent has been shot 9 times and Jay-Z was a past coke dealer, but rather they will only have their objectified, erased history, where they don't have to look at the history from the past, but rather approach every single case individually, and that's what they want. Okay, now to the point of transparency. The fact is that in today's world, we can in fact sue them. These mechanisms, these private companies. It has been done on a case of the most famous one being Compass. But secondly, there's really no difference on this side today, because on your side of the house, people do not challenge judges. The fact is that they are not held accountable for their actions at all. In fact, 9 out of 10 judges that were reported did not actually came back to the bench after this. And regarding transparency and how people don't actually understand how AI works, the fact is judges unfortunately make decisions literally like we told you, based on whether they have a snack or not, meaning that you can't understand their thought process anyway, and there is no transparency there either. Okay, and now on to the entire point about human touch. What we're telling you here is that basically, even though on our side of the house maybe somebody will get one year more, it is comparatively so much better than somebody getting 10 years less, because that is actually what is happening in the status quo. We've been giving you numerous examples of how judges, specifically in sentencing, for instance, in Connecticut, how they set bail at 25% higher for black defendants, where it's completely unfair for them, and only this can be solved by AI. Now, having told you all this, I will move on to our second substantive, which talks about further discrimination and inequality from the past. So, as we have explained to you continuously, is that today the system we live in is based on a biased history. The discrimination, segregation, and the result of this is that people, disenfranchised groups, are being treated poorly. But before I continue, I'll take a POI. I'll take a POI.
Yeah, okay, so let's just rewind back. You said that people don't challenge judges today. Do you think people would feel safer if robots were on the streets instead of police officers? They're going to be even more afraid to judge an AI than they're going to be afraid to judge.
Police officer here. This is a motion about criminal sentencing. But even if yes, I would be so happy if there were robots all around the street. They're racist cops. Unfortunately, not. Furthermore, okay, what is the result of this entire biased society? The fact that, first of all, a lot of people are incarcerated unnecessarily, where research in 2016 shows that 39% of people currently behind bars are not a threat to society and could have just done community service instead. And secondly, many people get sentences which are too harsh and too long. Okay, so what would an algorithm actually do with unified criteria that was fair and equal for all? Firstly, there will be less incarcerated people in the first place, okay? And secondly, many incarcerated people will be getting lower sentences because the judge's bias would be eradicated. In fact, a research from Washington Post shows that there will be 40% less people in prisons. Okay, so basically there are four major impacts here. The first one being less people going to prison and having to live through horrible conditions that prison provides. Secondly, people who would not be incarcerated in the first place would not experience all the problems of ex-convicts today, like unemployment, like literally half of Alabama not being able to vote because they are Black. Okay, and the third impact, people who would be sentenced to less time in prison would still have better opportunities in life, because it's a huge difference whether you're incarcerated for 3 or 15 years. And fourthly, a lot of money that is currently being wasted in the system could be used in specifically helping these minorities, in investing in their communities, investing in their education, and everything else. So because on the side of proposition, we truly do believe that justice can be blind, please.
Okay, I thank the speaker for their remarks. I now call upon the second speaker from side opposition to continue the opposition case. Tell me when you're ready. Yeah, we're good. If we can reset, there we go. Perfect. So, I'll start. So the first problem is that the opposition absolutely doesn't want to engage with our problems about the AIs absolutely not working and how the status quo is inherently changing for the better in the 21st century. They have failed to engage with the problems, and we will prove once again how it is not able to work and how the status quo is absolutely the best possible way to get to an equal society. I will do that with 5 points of rebuttal. The first point is explaining for a second the status quo. So firstly, the AIs are nowhere near developed enough to do this in the right way. Just by that, we have automatic cars that aren't even in the market. They cannot do anything. And a computer cannot make a difference between a cat and a brick, between different colors. And they can, so it is not likely that they will be able to do this in such a sophisticated way. And more importantly, the people will not believe that they have such power. If a car cannot go on the street and drive itself, even if it's in the works for 10 years, they will absolutely not believe that it is capable of making a fair decision about them that will reflect them for the rest of their lives. The second point is about Jeffrey Epstein and the millionaires and how this is a big problem in the status quo. But mind you, judges, this is not the fault of the sentencing part at any point. The system has failed before the sentencing part. There wasn't enough evidence gathered. There were corruption in the police and within the with the police and gathering evidence, and plea deals were offered to them. So they took plea deals even before they came to the courts. So plea deals, in your case, are still available, and they will still not come before the AIs. So they will still take a plea deal for a lesser crime, so they can escape a prison sentence. They will absolutely not take full accountability of their actions for their worst crimes, but take for something a bit less and go out unharmed completely. So that is not a problem that an AI faces at all. Our third point is on the perfect AI and why it doesn't exist and cannot exist once again. One, it has input based on previous experiences. The details in the crime have to, in order for it to make an equal sentence, it has to take into account different crimes from the past in order to see what the sentences fit.
Secondly, it has bias from the makers. Even if a diverse group of people makes this AI, it only gives it much more legitimacy, but in the end, there are still biases. You're talking only about race. Bias can mean anything. Bias can mean based on age, based on sex. You can have ageism in the as a bias, which can be a big problem. And those biases don't even have to be about race. They can be about the color of your shirt. And as Maxim said, the IBM Watson who picked people with tattoos as the most likely to commit crimes, as those who have committed crimes. And that has nothing to do with if they have actually committed crimes. Third thing, correlation versus casualty. As I have said, that some things that can be accidents in two different cases the AI will correlate it, and it is nowhere near the same cause. It doesn't have to have any similarities and affect a different case. And the fourth point, you cannot pinpoint biases in the system before. So in the future, you will not be able to improve it since you have no way of pinpointing exact biases in exact cases. If we could do that, then a lot of crimes would be made clearly from the past. So also, the third point of rebuttal is on the judges' flaws. Yeah, but judges, we can accept that they are trained professionals. And even if you believe that they have made a mistake, you can appeal to the Supreme Court. It is changing because of the Black Lives Matter movement, because they have the pressure for the elections. They need to be chosen by the people. So the times are moving in the status quo. We stand for seminars and we stand for education and we stand for more progress in a social environment. And you can still call them out, sue them, and go to different courts, even if you don't agree with the sentence. So you have a right to do that. You talked about plea deals. That is the fourth point. The plea deals that they won't go to trial because they'll get a bigger sentence in our case. But in your case, because you don't know how the AI is going to give you a sentence, you're scared that it will take into account some insane details that you don't even understand. And therefore, you're more likely to take accountability for a crime you didn't commit just so you wouldn't go to jail for a long time because you don't know how the AI works and what the sentence will be. When you have a judge, you can talk to him. You can try to make him understand you're not guilty or there were reasonable circumstances that he should take into account. You don't believe that the AI does those things, and you will take a plea deal even if you're not guilty or even if you shouldn't get the big sentence. The fifth point is on having trust in the system that you mentioned, and that brings us to our argument. We think that it is extremely important that you have faith in the government, the police, the courts, because they are the ones that make the rules, and trusting them, and when you trust them, you think you are equal. You believe that you want to pay taxes, you want to go to work, you want to have a family, you want to engage with the government because you have trust in them. But the public perception of this is different. Why are people scared of machines? You don't understand it. You're scared because you think they will take your job in the future, that they will replace you. A human can never process so much information, so you cannot comprehend how they can process so much information and give a fair call. You can physically see it. I can physically see a judge and I can see what their reaction is, but I cannot physically touch a robot. And the people who understand the machines the least are poor and uneducated, which are the people who are most affected by these sentences. So now, I'll take a question before I continue.
What is your reply to our statistic from this first speech that there's a 2019 study that shows that human judges were right in 60% of cases, whereas the most famous algorithm today was right in 90% of cases?
We are saying to you, we have proved to you how they are biased inherently. I will continue with my argument. Now, we have a situation where they don't understand the process because of the reasons I have explained to you, and they can lose trust in the government. Now, because you can go into protests and boycott the judges when you think they have made the wrong decisions, because you think that they can go to higher courts and that they can make a decision, they can fire a judge. Now, when an AI cannot, when you know that no matter what you do, the decision will stay the same because an AI is the same system for all. It's not a different judge you can go to if you think you have been a victim of bias. There is no point in boycotting it because you have no insight in the process, and the impact of this is that people will never be able to make a social change when they think a wrong has been done. They will never see how the government is doing them a favor because they don't understand the machine. So what Maxim has said, we are entrenching the status quo, and this destroys the vision of justice, as well as people's perception is completely altered in this world, and let them also fail.
Okay, I thank the speaker for their remarks, and I'll call upon the third speaker from side proposition to continue proposition case.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
On our side, justice is blind. We promise we won't put any cameras on algorithms. This is our stance in this debate, and algorithms, we will prove you, and we have proven you, are the only way in which you can get impartial and unbiased system, because the human component is the one that is making the whole thing problematic. So I'm going to explain to you for the last constructive time through three things. Firstly, what are the current trends? Secondly, onto where the vision of justice is better. And lastly, how should the system look like and where is it more impartial? So let's move on to the first point, where they tell you that judges are getting better, we can hold them accountable, etc., etc. We have this evidence. So in the case of United States versus Booker in 2005, judges were given greater freedom to avoid the guidelines given by the United States Sentencing Commission guidelines. So we have given judges greater freedom after this case. If we look how much longer sentences of blacks than whites were before this case, they were 5.5% longer. But if we look at it after the case, we see that this same number has risen to 19% longer sentences. This means that the more freedom we give to judges, the more racist the system becomes. So moving on to trends on algorithms. They tell you that algorithms, we cannot trust them, that they are not developed enough, etc., etc. But they never engage with with the actual fact that Compass, the most popular algorithm, is 30% more efficient in predicting recidivism. So we see that even current algorithms are good enough. It is not good. It is not enough for you to say that other parts of technology are not developed when we see that this specific one is more than good. So they tell you the second problem on algorithms is that you cannot pinpoint what is happening. You cannot pinpoint what the algorithm is talking about. So they must claim here that then their system has greater transparency. But what we tell you here is that, okay, we have an algorithm that is based on some information, but what transparency you have on your side? When we have judges saying, I felt like it, when we have judges saying, God told me the defendant was innocent, which actually happened in Texas, we cannot really say that they can pinpoint what exactly in judge's head is going on at any given time. So we would rather replace it with an algorithm that can improve, and there is an incentive for it to improve from the side of private companies to make better algorithms, while we see that no incentive whatsoever is happening on the side of judges. Because we have proven to you that current trends tell us that judges are becoming more racist, and that algorithms are getting better and better at predicting, we think that trends work inside of the proposition. So let's move on to the vision of justice. So what impacts actually the vision of justice? They tell you that what is the greatest impact, that they see a human, they see someone who participates in society, and that they have some stake. But note here, 3,190 judges who were convicted of misconduct in the United States had their identity hidden and information about their misconduct hidden from the public eye. So there is no accountability inside of the opposition. If you have some examples of accountability, please show it to us, because we don't see it when 9 out of 10 judges get back to their benches after they do misconduct. But also what we tell you is why you don't have that vision of justice is because the judges are very subjective and biased. When we tell you that 65% of judges rule differently after a snack, I tell you, what, should I give them a sandwich in order to get a file? We tell you that this kind of subjectiveness is something that very much hurts the vision of justice in the society. But also, we tell you that the greatest impact on vision of justice is the fact that 1 in 3 Black males is probably going to get imprisoned at some part of their life. And this is something that hurts the most the vision of justice in the whole system, not the fact that algorithm is over there. So we tell you that on our side, the system is impartial, and this is going to lead to greatest movement in the vision of justice. So we tell you that another important thing that happens here is the accountability. We tell you that currently judges have not been accountable for what they were doing, but before that, let's hear.
If the system is as rotten as you claim, you have to put the people from the system to develop the AI. You have never explained why they will not develop a non-biased AI. You've just said it won't be like that. Explain or don't. I don't care.
Okay, gladly. We tell you that this is going to be developed from the private companies that need to follow the trends in society. We tell you that it is much easier to follow the trends when you're a programmer than when you're handling the human mind, which has been biased for centuries and is something that is very unconscious and very imprinted. So we tell you that the clash on where the vision of justice is going to be better. We tell you that it is the side that gives you impartial system and that gives you less minorities treated differently, which happens exclusively inside the proposition. So how the system should look like, meaning where the system is more impartial. So why we tell you that we need this kind of unified criteria in order to get the best system? We tell you firstly that if you have a unified criteria, then everyone can accept the same thing for the same crime. We tell you that victims are seeing their rights put at first, not aside someone's wealth or race. And we see that this impacts on society mostly in the trust, because people see
Last chance point.
But why is the impartial system exclusive to fraud? Because we tell you that on their side, you have the human component. You have biases, both conscious and unconscious. We have given you examples of judges being racist, just like any other humans, but also unconscious part, where we tell you that, for example, portrayal of blacks in media is in the way that they So portrayal of blacks in media is in the way that they portray them as criminals. Seeing shows throughout your childhood, such as Breaking Bad, will make you later on as a judge more as reoffenders and give them longer sentences. So why this cannot change? Because we tell you, firstly, the human nature is to have this kind of responses when you see someone in the first seconds, but also if you look at the history. The whole history of criminal justice is based on the way that blacks have been put to jails more often. And I can talk about this for an hour and a half, but the movie 13 has done this already. We tell you that this is something that cannot change, but rather if we put an algorithm and we base it on the criminal record solely, we tell you that this is the point where we get a more fairer system. So because we have a blind justice solely on proposition.
Okay, I thank the speaker for their remarks. I now call upon the opposition third to continue opposition case.
Are the judges ready? Yeah, okay, so I can begin.
Yeah.
Right, so firstly, in my speech, I will discuss the two most important questions in this debate, which are firstly, will this system work? And why the status quo is the better option in this. Now, I have to make an observation, is that the opposition has completely refused to do any clashes with us throughout the entire debate. They gave us only 2 POIs in which they mostly ignored them. We didn't get any model of who is going to make this, and we got one like in the last speech that said private companies, and I will discuss this later. And mostly it's been unresponsive from the opposition, while we have tried to put our ideas forward with rebuttal. Now, this is what will be the beginning of my speech. Rebuttal on their, comparing their cases, like with what the proposition said and what the opposition said. Firstly, the proposition claims that this will be a fair and an impartial system. And this is the first place where they are wrong. The system will not change because you change the person or the system of sentencing. The system has much deeper flaws than just sentencing. And there are many examples for that. And we can even use the opposition's examples in these cases. Like, as you've said, we have rich people like Jeffrey Epstein, who have, I will allow points a little later. We have rich people who, as Jeffrey Epstein, who can get away with crimes, and you have people who just steal something and end up on almost life sentences. And that is not the issue of sentencing. That is the issue of the laws in the state. The state mandates that you can give it. We can't change legislator if we, later with points, you can't change legislator if you put this something rock solid. The second thing that they've said, the biggest thing about this, what we have responded with our arguments, is that by doing this, by making this system, you inherently make everything stagnate. You completely prevent the option for change. You can't change a system that has been programmed to think something like this, which leads to long-term consequences being much worse than in our world. In our world, we say, okay, maybe the judges are awful right now, but with societal change, with societal pressure, with much more accountability, we can change the way the judges see the world. If we do this, the judges are gonna even have an excuse to be like, yes, but the system is gonna give the sentence every time. So you stop any progression, and also you disincentivize people from fighting it. Because if you tell, like the proposition said, if you tell people it was developed by an impartisan private company, it was developed perfectly so it can work every time, the people are not gonna think it's gonna make a mistake. And then you have a big problem with people going and getting wrongly sentenced later, and then not fighting it and not using their rights to fight. The second thing that the proposition said is that AIs are better than humans and that we are advancing with rapidly developing it. Now, as my colleague said, and I will not repeat myself too much, but we are not really advancing too much with AI. We are advancing in simple stuff like captchas and things, but with such complicated issues, we can't put our faith in private companies or government companies or independent bodies or anyone in the world to make this the perfect system or to even make this a usable system. It's not going to be usable in any way if you can't distinguish, if a car can't distinguish to drive on a line that has been dotted out. And the AIs fail on the first obstacles and variables they are not learned to not fail on. And if you fail with sentencing, you are doing a much worse job than if a judge fails with sentencing. The third thing is making a model that is really vague, like having only criminal records and previous biases. And the opposition said nothing about both of our cases. And later with the POI, we have much time. The opposition did not respond once with the proposition, did not respond once to us saying, okay, yes, criminal records Right, we concede to that. But criminal records are inherently racist. People are going to be more likely to commit crimes because of necessity, because as both the proposition and the opposition agreed, we have systematic racism in this country, in most countries actually. And with that systematic issue, just giving lower sentences, if you look at criminal data, you will still discriminate people. You will just discriminate them on a different basis. Instead of discriminating them for being a person of color, you discriminate them for being poor. And we don't see any benefit in that. The last part that I'm going to compare is how the proposition says that the judges are sometimes openly biased and we have no accountability. And in your world, we have even less accountability. Because even with your statistic that we can't really check because we don't have time, even with your statistic that only 1 in 10 judges actually get sentenced for for making wrong decisions in convictions, you still have one person. If you remove the responsibility of conviction from the judges will never, ever be prosecuted because of their wrong convictions, because they can blame it on the computer. And the second thing about that is that if they are openly biased, they can make up a reason to give a bigger sentence, just like they make up reasons to give smaller sentences to the more rich people. Now, before I continue with just showing the 2 biggest questions, I will take a POI.
152 years ago, white people and black people were made equal by the law. For the last 10 years, we have seen the Black Lives Matter movement acting aggressively, and still there is no change in the system.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I don't know what the POI is. We both agree that there are systematic differences. The biggest thing is that we, as the opposition, claim that the proposition is handling this awfully. And I will talk about that a little later. Firstly, why this will not work. We already said a lot about it, but we can't, the opposition offered no answers on why this will be a biased system. It will just be biased in different ways. The opposition never offered why this will be biased from the makers. Like private companies have one big incentive, and that's money. They have no public incentive like the government has. The government has the incentive of people being happy. We've seen even with the coronavirus that the governments are more than happy to go and do something that is morally wrong just because the government told them to. And that goes back to why this will not work, because if you and we agree, then the proposition has really hammered this in, that the current situation is awful and too conservative and people are getting away with it. And if you give those people the power to make a permanent system which will decide sentencing, I don't know why the opposition thinks that their goody gumdrops world will be workable. I will take the last chance POI before you running out of time, but do it quickly.
Do you realize that judges are not going to be the one making this computer algorithm?
Right, okay, no. Let's see. The judges are put in there by people. The people, I'm sorry, you are on time. The judges are put there by people. The people are put there, are putting the judges because they are conservative. Like the Senate is controlled by judges. They're appointing judges. They're appointing judges who are going to go with their agenda. And now you're giving them the chance to make a system that will even deepen the problems and stagnate the solutions. The second thing is why the status quo is better. And we have said that in your system, you can't get any change. You are hardly getting any change when you can't change the thing. You never said it's going to evolve. And even if it would evolve, it would evolve by its own thinking, which would make it even worse by time. And the second thing is that judges have an incentive to change with times, and they have an even bigger incentive when we have more people to judge them. So as the conclusion, the proposition is solving the right issue in the wrong place and in a wrong way. The judicial system is flawed, it's wrong. People are wrongly arrested, people are wrongly accused, and the AI will trust the people who are wrongly accusing them. The AI will trust the corrupt evidence and the corrupt judges, and by those standards, it will make a decision. And that is the biggest thing here, that in any world, this system cannot work. And it's better to try to fix the status quo than to try to make something new. Thank you for your time.
Okay, I thank the speaker for their remarks. I now call upon the opposition reply speaker to conclude the opposition case.
Are you ready? Okay. So for starters, I would like to ask the panel a question. Would the panel like to be replaced with an AI when judging this debate? Well, we think that that would be a disastrous idea, because we think that an AI would give a completely false decision and give this debate to the proposition. Now, we have heard a lot of percentages today, but the only one correct is that this motion will 100% fail, for the reasons we have explained to you throughout our whole case. The proposition has completely failed to engage with our arguments and our rebuttals. Instead, the opposition has been using some statistics and shallow analysis on why an AI is simply objective. They have said that it will be fair and impartial because it is possible to create a completely objective algorithm, even though they have never engaged with our completely fair analysis of 5 levels of analysis, why that cannot be possible. And in the third speech has even given us that about the private companies who have no stake in all this and have not explained at all from the first speech how this will be made, by whom, and why that is the best decision. From the opposition, we have proved how the status quo is the natural fastest way to an equal society. Now we have movement. Now we have more liberal generations. You have said that slaves were 150 years ago liberated, but that's not true. Only 50 years ago were people of color given the same rights as other people had. That is so much. That is so much soon in our history. In the 21st century, we have movements that shake the whole country, like Black Lives Matter, like the Me Too movement. You have to see that the system is flawed, and that we are the only ones that accept that the system is flawed in either way. But the judges are the only ones that can make a change. Because the change is only possible when people feel like they have a right and that they can rebel and that they themselves can make a change. Because that is how the 21st century works, and that is how we have gotten to the place we have gotten now regarding equal rights and regarding prosperity in our societies. So you need to be able to oppose the judge when you think he is wrong. In your system, you absolutely remain stuck in time and slowly go back in history, as an AI will just do the same decisions over and over again from biased sources and from biased makers from your private companies. But in our world, where it is getting even more liberal, and when you have and when the times are so much changing so much faster, this is the only way that you will be able to make a change towards equal society. We have answered 2 big questions. Will it ever be able to work? We said no, and we have given again and again analysis of why this cannot simply work. And second question is, why is the status quo already changing? Which we have proved to you and then again and again that it is the best possible and the only possible way to have a change in society towards the equal rights. So for these reasons, we think that team opposition has completely won this debate, and you should let the motion fall. Because you have completely disregarded our clutches and engagement and didn't answer when we asked how this will be run and how is it possible that it won't be objective, we think that you should let the motion fall. Thank you.
I thank the speaker for their remarks. I now call upon the proposition reply speaker to conclude the case for the proposition and the debate as a whole.
Okay, can everyone hear me, see me, so we can do this? I genuinely wish I lived in the same world the side of proposition does, because apparently the Black Lives Matter movement actually did accomplish the fact that Black people aren't getting in prison as much, and the Me Too movement did accomplish that women aren't getting raped enough, that their rapists are getting proper sentences. Unfortunately, I don't live in this world. I live in the real world, the world in which side opposition has taken this debate, the side proposition has taken this debate, and let me tell you one last time why that is so. First point here about something that for the last 12 minutes the side of opposition has tried to tell you that we have not said, but unfortunately I'm going to have to repeat myself then. The fact is the trend of improvement that we can see in the AI that we have consistently proven to you literally since the second minute of our speech, where we have given you the example of facial recognition, another system of AI that is used in everyday world, where in 2014 the accuracy it made a mistake in 4.5% of cases, and just this year that lowered to 0.08%. Why is this? Two main things. First of all, it is the incentive of private companies to generate profit, because money makes the world go round. And I honestly don't understand how the opposition didn't do enough research for this debate to realize that judges aren't the ones making these algorithms. Okay, this is private computing companies, people who literally have no incentive on whether they're going to be biased or racist or whatever. They only have incentive to make as much money as possible. And the second, that brings the second incentive being backlash, where with facial recognition, what happened was that in the small case of when they actually did make a mistake, there was so much backlash to the company that they immediately raised this error. And that is exactly what can only happen on our side with computers. Why? Because you can't program computers, you cannot program people. We have told you so many times that unfortunately humans are biased in every way, not just throughout their entire life, but the society, the media, everyone is making them this way. And we can see that it literally takes 10 years for a movement to accomplish almost nothing. Well, let me tell you, we are done with waiting. We want a radical change that can actually help these people. And now let me tell you about the changes this actually makes in my second point. Well, while the best statistic that the side of opposition has given us throughout their entire bench was cats versus bricks, that AI might not be able to see this. We have told you literally that this year there was a Stanford Berkeley research made that showed that in 30% of cases that algorithms will make a better and more accurate decision than people. Okay, further evidence that we have given to you that the side of opposition completely decided to ignore. 40% less people would be in prisons today if the sentencing decisions were made differently because of those that were made of racism. From this, we would generate over $80 billion of profit, which would be invested into these communities that they keep talking about, where minorities come from and where they're actually worse off. Okay, their sentences would be reduced by 20%. Why? Because all of this can be done by an algorithm. And when you tell us again in your 7th minute of your op3 that what's wrong is currently the entire system. We're telling you, unfortunately, the entire system before the sentencing is wrong on both sides. But that is not what we're debating at all. We're debating the sentencing in the end, which we have shown to you has a huge importance, because in the end, the judges are actually the ones who give 20% longer sentences, no matter if before that people were convicted of being guilty or not. We're telling you that on our side of the house, there's so many harms that you never touch for people who would not be sent to prison in the first place, who could actually just serve community service and never have their lives taken away. But for people also who would have reduced sentences, who would instead of 15 years go to prison 3 years, and after that be able to actually have a normal life once again. All of this never touched by the side of opposition. Unfortunately, I could go on and on about everything they didn't touch on our side of the house, but the fact is that if there's any justice, if you want there to be any justice in the world, you will give this debate to side opposition.
I thank the speaker for their remarks. I congratulate all speakers for their speeches, and invite you all to relax. And I'm going to see if we can get the judges moved into another room.
Hello, Tracy. We're on it.
Oh, there you are. Excellent.
Yes. You should be moved.
Thank you.
Promptly.